So, hello and welcome to the first in a series of Amdoc's 5G radio show. My name is James Crawshaw and I'm an analyst with Heavy Reading. And I'm joined today by Angela Logothetis, who is CTO of Amdoc's Open Network. Angela, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, James. It's great to be talking to you today about one of my favorite topics, which is 5G.
Indeed, indeed. And we're going to be addressing a couple of different aspects. First of all, we're going to talk about the monetization of 5G. And then we'll dig into some of the nitty-gritty operational challenges of 5G networks. But let's start out with the sexy side, the monetization. So finally this year, we're starting to see these 5G networks getting deployed. We've had a number of deployments already. And by the end of this year, there will be many 5G networks up and running across the world. This time round, in contrast to some of the other generations of mobile technology, we've actually got chipsets that are ready, we've got handsets that have been launched, and the radio infrastructure is ready to roll. But what about monetization? Is that an afterthought? Are operators going to be able to capitalize on 5G and monetize it in some distinct way from their existing mobile business? How do you see that panning out, Angela?
Really good question, James. And you've hit on the topic that is top of mind for all of the service provider customers that we talk to today. Look, when I think about 5G, 5G is coming at the same time as many other complementary technologies like cloud computing and edge computing and new devices like smart glasses and technologies like AI and software-defined networks and software virtualization. And all of these things are coming together and have the potential to change the way that we live and change the way that we work with a whole raft of new applications and services, some of which we can predict and many of which where we sit today, we're not going to be able to predict. And the opportunity for a service provider is to be able to deliver those applications and services and be able to monetize them. So when I think about 5G, it's not all coming at once. It's going to be a multi-year journey for service providers to deploy these networks and for all of these new applications and services to be invented and delivered. So let's think about wave one, which is kind of here and now. So wave one is when the service provider starts to put 5G radio technology out into the 4G radio network. And what does that mean? The sorts of things that we do today, the services that we use today, are going to be faster and they're going to have lower latency, i.e. better response times. So, for example, I'm a heavy mobile office user. I'm always on the road and I want to be able to do the same things when I'm out and about that I can as I'm in my office. And today I have to find a high quality, reliable Wi-Fi network to be able to do that. But with 5G coming along, I will be able to have mobile office truly mobile. For small, medium enterprises pop-up branches and mobile branches and the ability to move an office site and to instantly have the same level of enterprise applications that they have inside their head office or their existing branches will become possible because you'll be able to turn on 5G connectivity and have it connected into the corporate network at the touch of a couple of buttons. So the first few 5G applications and services will be the things that we do today, but they'll be faster and they'll be more responsive. Wave two, as more and more radio network gets rolled out, other than just in the first few cities, and as the 5G edge comes into play, you're going to see applications and services that we kind of do today, but do them in vastly different ways. So one example is everybody's probably seen over the last couple of weeks a whole lot of announcements around increasing competition in the streaming TV domain, and for the first time, some pretty powerful streaming gaming type services. So if you think about those two things, most people consume streaming TV on a fixed line fiber connection with a big TV screen in their home, and most people consume gaming either through dedicated consoles or very expensive high-powered PCs, and again on a fixed line connection. 5G with fast 5G radio and a 5G edge makes it possible for those things to move into the mobile network. So you'll be able to play really advanced games on a mobile device and on a mobile network without needing to be stuck with a fixed line connection and a fixed line PC. And streaming video, instead of having to download it today before you go on a long road trip for the kids, you'll be able to just stream it as you're going along. So we'll start to see services that we do today available in different ways to what we use them today. And then wave 3 is when the full 5G new architecture comes into play and the new 5G business models really come into play. And that's where we start to see the full 5G radio, the full 5G edge, and the full 5G core. And once you have all of those capabilities, you can start to use a single 5G network to be many networks to many different people. So it can start to support autonomous drones that are delivering packages. It can support real-time parcel tracking and real-time baggage tracking. It can support telemedicine and e-health, and it can support autonomous cars and platooning. And actually all of these sorts of things that we think are a long way off in the future are starting to happen far quicker than what we thought, and you're starting to see fairly early examples of them. Now, what does it mean? In wave 1, service providers are going to be able to monetize 5G by offering things like different tiers of services to people. So today, if you think about being a consumer, you buy a package on a 4G network, and it's largely either uncapped or it's based on how much data you consume. In 5G, they're going to have the opportunity to say, well, maybe I can provide different speeds of service. Angela is a heavy mobile office user. She does video conferences. She's going to be prepared to pay for 100 megabits of speed, no matter where she is in the network. Other people are just web browsing and occasionally watching YouTube and Facebook, and they're best effort. So I don't sell them a package that guarantees speed. Likewise for pop-up offices, you can provide a 2-hour turnaround of connectivity for an for an SMB or an enterprise, and you can charge for that. So from wave 1, they'll be able to come up with different monetization. Wave 2, as you move into streaming gaming and streaming video, actually you'll find that consumers of those services are prepared to pay for it because it's integral to the experience of being able to game or watch video. So they'll be able to provide for different quality of service around those applications. And once you move into wave 3 and you're doing all the advanced enterprise type applications, you'll start to see the potential to do B2B to X monetization and partner monetization and multi-party monetization, where the connectivity is such an integral part of the service that that people are prepared to pay for it as a part of that service. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for monetization around 5G. The key trick for the service provider is how do they start to get prepared for this? How do they start to make sure they've got the right platforms, the right flexibility, the right agility to be able to not just monetize a network or a voice, text, or data service, which is what they do today, but to be able to monetize the entire ecosystem, the partners as well as the end users, and to be able to monetize the actual application or the thing that you're trying to do over the network.
Interesting. So just picking up on that last point about this B2B to X type business model, today's billing systems and BSS systems that operators have, they can cope with some sort of partner management capability. But we're talking here about a whole new level of innovation, that the product and service catalogs are going to need to be updated and changed very, very fast. There are new charging models that are going to be required. It's not just about voice and megabytes of data. Are the operators' IT systems able to support this kind of innovation?
A really good question. Obviously, it depends operator by operator as to what they already have in place. But the key message is the service providers need to be looking at this now and preparing for this now. And if they're not getting this in place around wave one, the first thing is they're missing the opportunity to start to get early monetization, even just of the faster speed and the lower latency for a 5G service. But that, what we see in technology is things are a little bit, slow to start, but then they ramp up almost exponentially. And so when these applications start to run, they're going to really, really run. And you can't predict what they're going to be. So service providers need to get in place the right sort of infrastructure that gives them flexibility around what sort of service are they providing? It's not just voice, it's not just data, it's not just text, it's not just connectivity. They need to be retooling themselves to provide streaming video, streaming gaming, mobile health, mobile education. These are the services that people are prepared to pay for. So the service provider has to be able to onboard the partners, build the service profile for that, build the service offering for that. And then the monetization around it is no longer just monetizing the end user, which is kind of what happens today, but it's monetizing all the people in the chain. Is this an advertising model for monetization, which I know is not very popular at the moment, but it's in the press, but it's always going to be a part of the world. Is it you monetize the end user? Is it you monetize the application provider? Is it you monetize some intermediate like a retail store or a shopping center or a stadium? They need the flexibility to do all of this, and they need to be putting it in place now.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about network slicing. It's one of the buzzwords that's associated with 5G. It's supposed to open up all sorts of new opportunities for enterprise services. How do you see that being deployed? Is each enterprise customer going to pick and choose their own specific slice, or will there be sort of 4 or 5 menu options of different quality of service grades that they get to choose from?
Yeah. So I think of a 5G network as one network that looks like a completely different network to different people. Okay, so for example, if the application that you're using over 5G is tracking of parcels or tracking of baggage, then the network needs to be able to cope with millions to billions of tiny little sensors on it that are embedded in the packages or the bags, right? And those sensors have very, very small batteries with very low battery life. So to them, and they don't send much data, right? It's a little ping saying, hey, here I am. So to them, the network needs to look like super, super efficient to cope with this very low battery life and very low transmission of data, but very, very high volume to be able to cope with these billions of devices. But you compare that to what the network needs to look like for streaming gaming, where it's going to need to be very, very high bandwidth and very, very high speed to cope with all the graphics resolutions, and extremely low latency, so that when you do the action on your tablet or your device, instantly that's having the response that you need. Whereas for telemedicine or health, you need a network that is very high resolution because the quality of the images is key, but it also needs to be ultra secure and protect privacy. So all of these different applications that we're talking about have very different demands over the network. And this is where not just network slicing, but a whole set of capability around the network slicing comes into play, because it's the key smart software layer that actually makes this one set of 5G network that you've built become the network for all of these different applications. And it's not just doing it for one of them, it's doing it for all of them at the same time. And that's where network slicing comes into play. Now, will each individual application have its own slice? No, we don't see that as a scalable, manageable model. We actually think you can get really smart about this and define a number of slices of different capabilities, and then the network guys can define those, and then they can provide them to the product guys in the organization, and they can bundle them together to define all these new products and applications and services that they're going to deliver out to market.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, maybe just one other comment about it. We talked about the monetization. So if you think about it, why is the service provider going to be able to monetize 5G? And why will it not just become over the top services and they still can only monetize for connectivity? Because it really comes down to the quality of service or quality of experience of what people are trying to do, right? Voice, data, text, we've kind of got a quality of experience expectation around, but it's nowhere near the quality of experience or quality of service that's needed for gaming or video, streaming video, or health or education or autonomous cars. You know, some of those things are absolutely mission critical. And so if you combine the ability to slice the network for this thing with then the ability to monetize it, that's the business model for the service provider. They're really monetizing a guarantee around the experience or the quality of service. And so they need two layers. They need the monetization layer and the smart layer to make this possible.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let's move on to talk a little bit about some of those nitty-gritty network operational challenges of 5G. For starters, let's talk about the deployment phase. Is the idea that you build out some sort of macro site coverage for 5G in the big cities, and then over time you complement that by densifying with small cells? Is that the sort of typical pattern that you're seeing your operator customers talk about?
So great question. I think it depends on where you are in the world. Certainly inside the US, there is a massive push towards both densifying, i.e., adding in more macro and more small cells into this network and making it, anywhere up to 10 times the size of what it is today. Versus, in other places like parts of Europe, we hear service providers saying, look, actually, I don't need much more density, but what I do need is to just upgrade the existing network that I have from 4G to 5G. So it varies country to country, service provider to service provider. But the key thing around this is they all need to either upgrade network or densify and upgrade network, and they all need to get 5G out there, and the race is on. You already look at in Korea, the three mobile service providers launched 5G on the same day to, all be out there first with the network. In the US, there's a lot of press going on around who's first with 5G. The race is on, and service providers need to get it out there, and they need to get it out there fast. They need to get it out there efficiently, and they need to get it out there at scale. And so the traditional sort of network rollout processes, or the way that they would have done it around 4G some 5 to 10 years ago, aren't going to make them competitive enough in the race for 5G. And so they're all looking at, how do we start to automate these processes? How do we automate our planning, engineering, and design processes? How do we automate our rollout processes? How do we automate the integration and testing and accepting of network before we turn it on? And then how do we actually automate the optimization of it as people start to use it and the profile and the demands on the network change? So all of that is starting to be, all of them are looking at ways that they can automate that.
What about the ongoing operations? Once you've built the network and you've optimized it on an ongoing basis, have operators got all the tools in place that they need from their existing RAN suppliers, for example, or is there some sort of complementary tools required to make the ongoing management more efficient?
Yeah, there are two things around this area that is a fundamental change for service providers. So the first thing is, a 5G network will be much larger than a 4G network, and it will also be far more dynamic. It's going to be a software-based, virtualized, cloud-based network. So it's dynamically flexing in scale, in location based on needs. And it's going to carry far more data across it and a far broader range of services. It's not just voice, data, text type services. So service providers need to be able to operate this thing. And is it possible to operate it with the way they operate a 4G network today? No, it's not. So they need to put a lot more intelligence, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and a lot more automation into operations. I kind of think about it as the path to autonomous operations. How do you move from the way you operate a 4G network today to operate a 5G network, because it's a vastly different network that you're trying to manage. The second thing around it is 4G is still going to be in play for a long time, even if you look out as far as 2025. By then, about half the world will have coverage and connectivity on 5G, and about half will be on 4G. So that to me says operators for a long time are having to manage a network that is in some places 4G, in some places 5G, and the end user kind of doesn't care, right? They want the same level of service no matter what. So they're managing a hybrid network, and operators need to think about how they're going to do that. The new 5G systems will do 5G, the existing 4G systems will do 4G, but that doesn't work because it has to work as one network. So operating the hybrid network becomes key. And then the final thing is, if you think about that change in business model we were talking about earlier, around an ecosystem of partners and all of these new applications and services and the flexibility and agility around that. The 5G network, service providers need to be thinking about building it as a platform. How do we make this an open network that we can introduce innovation into, and new partners and new ecosystems into? How do we make it an open network that we can get all of the data out of it that we need in real time to understand where people are and what devices they have and what they're using and how it's performing? And how do we get the real-time control back into the network so that we can actually configure these slices and enforce these slices and guarantee quality of service? So they also need to be creating network not as a proprietary closed network with very fixed allocation of usage. It needs to be an open network as a platform type concept that you can very quickly and easily and flexibly use for many different things. So that they're kind of the three big challenges that they have around operations.
Interesting. Great. Well, Angela, we've pretty much come to the end of our time for today's show. But as I said, this is the first in a series of Amdocs radio shows around the topic of 5G. So I hope you'll be able to come back at a later stage and share some more of your insights. But for now, I'd just like to thank Angela Logothetis, CTO of Amdocs Open Network, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, James. It's been a good conversation.
Great. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.